So let's look at this point from the Parsha. It's a Wayahi this week, at least according to the annual cycle. And we have Jacob wanting to give out a series of three blessings. The first is to Joseph himself, and then to his children, and then to the rest of the tribes, and Joseph also. So basically, Yosef gets blessed three times. So what happens there? By the way, blessing. The line between blessing, instruction, and prophecy is kind of blurred over here. It has elements of all three. The blessing is, it's in the general sense, which, by the way, makes you wonder, what is a blessing? How does that work? Someone pronounces you should have a lot of health and prosperity, lots of money, peace, whatever it might be, whatever you bless someone with. And then you wonder, does that have some sort of metaphysical power to cause that person to receive that which with which he has been blessed? Is that how it works? Can only someone who actually has a connection to God do it? Does God listen to blessings? Is it exactly as Chazal said, Tzaddik gozer, v'akadosh baruch hu mekayim, the righteous person decrees, and the Holy One, blessed be He, so to speak, fulfills it? I'm not really quite sure where that goes. So it's a little bit, I guess this would be a class for mystics and Kabbalists to describe it, explain to us how blessing works. But once you get into this and you realize, a blessing is, in this case, sort of an instruction, hora'ah, and it's also nivuah. But we also said nivuah is less about a prediction of the future, or I guess, like they say, sipur ma'asim ba'alma. It's telling you what will be, future atidot, like they say. It's more like an instruction. Here's what you should be doing. Perhaps it's more of an encouragement. Yeah, it's really not clear, but it does seem that the blessings eventually were fulfilled because they took it upon themselves to do so. Das Mikra points out that a large part of the blessings describes the parts of Eretz Yisrael that each of the brothers were supposed to receive as their ancestral heritage. That is, and they point out a few examples. Already, the Avos started taking possession of the land, large parts of the land. So when Yehuda got that large part of the southern area of Eretz Canaan, it was basically him reclaiming that which already started to become his. And when Yosef got Yosef's portion, it was also a reclamation of sorts, especially in Ever Yarden. We saw that perhaps there was even large Jewish settlement of, I guess, even great-grandchildren of Yaakov Avinu himself who were there. So go see that. We've discussed that before. The question is, at a certain point, Yosef was surprised, and I guess perhaps scandalized by something his father was doing. What happened? It says that Jacob, wanted to bless Ephraim and Menashe, and he put his hands on their heads. He put his right hand on Ephraim and his left hand on Menashe, even though Ephraim had been presented on his right. That's what Yosef tried to do. And Jacob commenced blessing them, at which point Yosef objected. Hey, father, what are you doing? This is, put your right hand on the firstborn. That's Menashe. Don't put on Ephraim. Basically, Yosef was realizing that Jacob was deciding to put Ephraim before Menashe. He's basically giving the firstborn privilege to the second child and removing the privilege from the older child. Now, if you've been following what we've been discussing for the last few years, and you've been following just the book of Genesis and into the book of Exodus, you would have seen, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, that the running theme is the firstborn is rejected and replaced. We have this idea of the chosen people, and we have to filter through different generations. Even Avraham Avinu, he's chosen. Not all of his descendants are considered chosen. Was it Yishmael is a reject, B'nai Keturah a reject, but before this, Avraham Avinu himself was chosen from among his family. We saw that the potential is alluded to in people like Aver and Yoktan, his son, who had 12 major descendants, all starting nations. Nahor's children, Nahor, that would be Avraham Avinu's brother, has 12 sons. Esav is a reject. There's this winnowing process, but the we haven't found an example yet of someone who is mentioned as having brothers. Noach, we don't know who his brothers were. Even though we knew he had brothers, we don't know if he was a firstborn or not, so that's irrelevant. But whenever it mentions brothers, and you know who is older than whom, we also know who the reject was, and that was the first one. Now, Yosef had just heard from his father, basically, that we see explicit in Divrei Yomim and explicit in the Targum, but in poetic form a few times in this parasha, that Reuben, the firstborn, has been not rejected, but has been replaced. He tells Yosef, your sons, Ephraim and Menashe, will be like Reuven and Shimon to me. You are now going to be, like Moshe Rabbeinu says, Bechor Shoro, his ox, his firstborn ox. That is to Jacob. So you understand that Yosef had been told, basically, Reuven loses out because of whatever his failings, and Yosef wins. And then immediately thereafter, Yaakov continues with this. Oh, and by the way, Menashe is also replaced. I would think that if Yosef was following along, reading the book, and had just heard what his father had told him regarding his own older brother, Yosef should not have been surprised. So why was Yosef surprised? Why was Yosef scandalized at what just happened? Just like Reuven is to be replaced by Yosef, and to a certain extent Levi and Yehuda, so too Menashe is being displaced by Ephraim, the younger brother. It's a question. And I believe the answer lies in everything that we've read about until this point. Even Reuven is not rejected from Am Yisrael. Yishmael and his brothers, Esav and the rest, they are actual rejects. They are not considered part of this covenant. Yaakov Avinu, Mitaso Shlema, they're going to say Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem Kol Malkuthol L'Olam Ha'ed. They're all part of the club. But Reuven himself is still losing out on his special privilege because of his errors, okay? His own decisions in life and his own mistakes. What did Menashe do? That is basically Yosef's question. Menashe is, at most, maybe 18 years old. It says he was born before the famine started. So the famine was 2 years old when Jacob came to Egypt, and now this 17 years later. Maybe Menashe is 19, 20, whatever it could be. We don't know exactly when Ephraim and Menashe were born. There's a window there, okay, about a 7-year window. So also, I guess, just a 6-year window for Yosef to get married to Asenath, Kamatz Rachav, Asenath. If you're speaking modern Hebrew, it's definitely not Osnat or Osnat. It's a Kamatz, and they pronounce Kamatz like a patach, so it'd be Asenath, whatever. Yosef was wondering, what has Menashe done? So that's why Yaakov even tells him, Yadati bini Yadati, gam hu yelam, gam hu yigdal. Really, I understand what's troubling you, Yosef, but it's not that anything's wrong with Menashe. But Ephraim's just going to be the real deal. The Mashiach ben Yosef and other great men like Yoshua, who's the precedent for Mashiach ben Yosef, the one who started the conquest of the land of Israel and built the first temple, unlike King David, who completed the conquest and didn't have as good a winning streak as Yoshua. Yoshua barely lost men in his battles. It was when people, if Jews fell, by Jews I mean Hebrews, Israelites, fell in Joshua's battles, it was remarkable. It must have been something was really wrong. He barely lost anybody. David's time, people were falling in battle. And David also didn't get a chance to actually build the temple, but technically speaking, Yoshua did. And everything was done. Yoshua achieved the same level of King Solomon, if you compare the verses there. And Yeravam also had tremendous potential. He came from Ephraim, and according to Rashi, also the Omerite dynasty, which is quite great, but also large failures. We're going to talk about them soon in a minute. So they failed. And but either way, Ephraim had the potential. Zaro Yel Moa Goyim, or we still wait for the Ephraimite, I guess, Jophesic. How do you say Joseph? Well, when you say that, what would be the demonym of being from Joseph? I don't know. I guess the adjectival form of that word. Either way, Mashiach ben Yosef. So we're waiting for that type of character. So that's why Yaakov Avinu had to, I guess, calm down Yosef. Don't worry about it. There's nothing wrong with Menashe. Ephraim just gets certain privilege. By the way, Menashe still enjoys major privilege, getting a large portion of the land of Israel, larger than of Ephraim. Many more families came from Menashe, who was a bigger tribe eventually. But don't worry about it. He's not a reject. That's the thing. He's not really losing out. Just Ephraim will get more.